Hello, my name is Carl Surry and this is a video tutorial for two Facebook groups. The first being the fans of Serif software and the other one being Affinity Designer and Photo group. Now in this tutorial I want to adapt this written tutorial which is made for Photoshop and is found on the photoshopessential.com website, and it is using a photo as its own background. And this is the photo they used, a wedding couple, and that is the end result with the photo itself as the background to a smaller version of the image. So I'm going to adapt this for Affinity Photo in the first part of this video, and in the second part of the video I'm going to adapt it for PhotoPlus, which is Serif's earlier PC only photo editing program. They're virtually the same, but there are some slight differences, so I'm going to do it for both programs. So like I said, this is a written tutorial, so I've adapted it, but I will add the link to this tutorial if you want to just double check it and look at it yourself, and maybe look at some of the other written tutorials that they do in this website. So I'm going to go to Affinity Photo first. Now this was the result of the first practice run that I did. And this image and the next image I'm going to show you both come from Pixabay.com, and I will be adding links to both of the images so that you can use it for your practice, or you can use your own images. Now that said, you don't have to do a wedding couple like they did in the written tutorial for Photoshop, or even a couple like that I have used here, because I'm just trying to sort of stick within the framework of the tutorial. But I mean, you could have a picture of your kid or even your favorite dog or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The one thing that you really do need though is for the subject or subjects to be to one side of the image, allowing some free space on this side, sort of, because that is going to be lost pretty much where you put the smaller main image onto the side of the couple that you have in the background. So but that's all you really need to take into consideration, the fact that you need a bit of space on one side or the other. Now the other image which I used was this one, and this is the image I'm going to use in the Affinity Photo part of this tutorial, and I will be redoing using this image in the PhotoPlus part of the tutorial. So let's start with this image. Now the first thing you need to do is to duplicate this layer twice. Technically you don't really need to, because we don't really end up using this bottom layer, but it's more of a sort of a safety net and a way of comparing, if you want to, where we started from. So it is probably, a lot of times it is always safer to not alter the original background and just keep that in case something goes wrong, and then you can just reduplicate it again if you want and start again. So you can duplicate it in a number of ways, but the easiest way is just to right click that layer and come to duplicate, or just press Ctrl and J. So I'll click it once there, and I'll just press Ctrl and J to make a second copy. Now I'm going to rename this top layer. You don't necessarily have to, but again I'm just following the written tutorial just so I know that that is going to be the smaller version that's going to be in the corner. But I'm then going to hide that layer because I don't need it till later, and then I know that that one is going to be the background layer, so I'm going to highlight it so we can start making the alterations to this layer. Now the first thing we want to do is to sort of set a tone for the image, and what I want to do is, what we need to do is to make a selection of a colour from the image. You don't necessarily have to, you could just pick a random colour if you've got a good eye for these things, but it is best to, if you just use the colour picker tool, and it is currently set on 0.1 times 1, which basically means it will just pick 1 pixel from wherever the cursor is. But if you change this to average 5 times 5, it will select a colour which is an average of the 5 times 5 square from wherever the cursor is. And I'm going to select an area from this lady's tights to give me that sort of nice beigey tan colour. You could pick any colour just so it gives you, or even the background, because it will give you the tone of the image. So I'm just going to click there, and it will put that colour as the foreground colour up here in the top right. Now in the written tutorial they use, if I go back to this here, if I find it quickly, hopefully, yeah, see they've done it at 5 by 5 average, and they selected part of this girl's face for the tonal range. And so, but what they've used is colorize, which is part of the hue saturation part of Photoshop. Now this isn't available in Affinity Photo, but it's not as far as I can find. There is a colorize option in PhotoPlus, but again it doesn't really work in the same way as it does in Photoshop. So to get around that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a fill layer. So come up to layer and then new fill layer, and it will add a fill layer from the colour that we had already selected. And then all I've got to do then is change the blending mode to colour. So next I want to flip this image, so I'll come to the arrange menu, come down to flip horizontal. I will then highlight the top layer and then put a tick in it to bring that image back. And on the move tool I will come to one of the corners, hold down the control key and click and drag the image to roughly the size I want it, and I'm just going to click and move it to roughly where I want it. They can all be altered later, and the background image will also be altered a bit later because at the moment it is too far over to the right and I want it a bit further over to the left. But first we want to add an effect to this top layer, and I can click on the FX button, which is down here in the layers panel, and it will open up the layers effect panel. And we want the outline options. I'm going to put a tick in outline and then click on the outline layer itself to bring up the options for that layer. Now again, I'm going to want a outline for this image that sort of uses some tones from the image itself. At the moment it is currently set on black, so if I click on that black box there, it will bring up the color options. Now if I hold down the control key and click on this color picker here, it will, and I'll keep the control key held down and the left mouse button held down while I drag, I can select a colour from the image. Now this is quite a dark image. I want to go for quite a lightish colour, so I'm going to pick a grey from this man's shirt, and then it will put that colour in this little circle here, and if I click on that, it will change that colour for the outline in that box there, and then I can just increase the radius of the outline, and I'm going to come to, I would imagine somewhere between 8 and 10 pixels. I'll leave that on 8.9. Now the next thing I want to do, we'll leave the effects panel open, and what I want is an outer shadow, so I will click on the box next to the word outer shadow to put a tick in it, and then click on the layer itself to highlight it and bring up the options. Now again, I think in the original tutorial they picked a colour for the shadow which was, if I remember rightly, the darker part of the skin of the lady in the bridal image. But as this is quite a dark image, if I want to be able to see the drop shadow, I'm going to really need it to be black, so I'm going to leave mine set on black. I'm going to leave the angle set on 315, so it comes down in this direction here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to push the radius right the way up to 100 and the offset right the way up to 100, and the intensity I'm going to go to about 17, 18, somewhere like that. And in the opacity I'm going to push up quite high, and I mean, like I said, it is quite hard to see. It is there. If I put this up to the lower lighter part of this image, you can see that it is there just about. It does get lost a little bit in this dark image. So once I'm happy with that, I'll just click on close. I'll just come off the move tool so you can see this without the line going around it. So what I want to do now is to alter the size or position of the image behind. So I'm going to click and highlight that, and I'm going to select the move tool, and I'm just going to zoom out a bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm just going to drag this out and then move it over to the left like that. It's all a bit trial and error, and see what works and what doesn't work. Each image will be slightly different. So right, I think that's okay there, and I will now highlight this top layer. And again, I'm already on the move tool, so I mean, you don't necessarily have to have it down here. You could move it up there, for example, and then alter the size. So this was my first attempt. I obviously made it a bit lighter in that version. Let's see if I can do it again. I'll just highlight that layer, and I can't remember how I got there, so this is going to be a bit of trial and error. I'm going to just lower the, or increase the brightness of that a bit. Probably not as good as my first attempt. I really should make better notes of what I did to do these things. I'm very sorry, but as you can see, you can tinker with the settings and make a different image whatsoever, but you get the idea of placing a smaller version of the original image next to the bigger version. So all you need to do then would be to export this under a new name, and that is the end of the Affinity Photo tutorial. Sorry for that bit of error at the end, but I will now move on to looking at doing this in PhotoPlus. Okay, now this is really just for the Facebook group fans of Serif software, where users are still using the older photo editing program PhotoPlus. Now it's pretty much the same as doing this in Affinity Photo, just with some minor differences, and this is how I did this image in PhotoPlus. So let's just start with the start image, and I just need to duplicate this layer, and I will leave this one called background copy, and then duplicate it again, and this time I'll call this one main photo, and then I'm going to just click in this hide and show layer button, so that layer is now hidden, and then I'm going to click on and highlight the middle layer, and we are then going to start altering this middle layer to be our background. Now we need to pick a tonal range for this image, so we do have the eyedropper color picker tool here, so I'll click on that, and at the top here it probably starts off as point sample, but I'm going to, you can then click on 5x5 average, and I'm going to pick on a area of her skin, or maybe even a bit brighter than that, lighter. I'll go with a hair color, I think, this time. So that color is now the foreground color. Now if you've watched the introduction to this video, I did say to you that there is the colorize option with PhotoPlus, but it doesn't, unlike the colorize in the tutorial for Photoshop, when you select it, it doesn't select the color that is in the foreground color. You'd have to sort of probably make notes of what those numbers are and do it that way, but I would do it the same way I did it in Affinity Photo, which is I'll come to layer, new field layer, just click OK for the name and leave it as solid, and then change the blending mode to color, and then I'll right click on that and merge down. So we then have that single layer for the background copy, and I will then select the hue saturation, and this time I'm going to push the luminance saturation out to 20, and whereas in Affinity Photo I went minus, this time I've sort of got to go plus, and I'm going to go to plus 35 or 6, whichever one I get to first, or just type it in, be easier. And then I will right click on that layer and merge that down, so that is now all one layer. And then I'll come up to the layers menu and the image menu and flip horizontally, but make sure you select layer. So this is changed over to the other side now, and then I can highlight the top layer and make it visible. And you don't alter the size with the move tool in PhotoPlus, you need to use the deform tool. So click on the deform tool, hold down the control key and the shift key is control in Affinity Photo, shift in PhotoPlus, and then just hold down the shift key and drag that inwards to roughly the size you want it. Just roughly position it where you want it. And so now we're going to need the outline and the drop shadow. Now, much like as in Affinity Photo, down here in the bottom there is the FX panel, and you click on that and open that up. And the first one we're going to go for is outline. Now what I should have done here was to select a colour first, because again you can't really use a colour picker at this point. So let me just cancel that and cancel that a second, and I will use the colour picker, and this time I'm going to select a darker colour, a shadow of this lady's skin under her neck here. So I can now see those numbers for what that colour is there. So if I then open the effects and then outline, I can then just read the numbers. So red is 155, green is 125, and the blue is 99. So that is now set as the same as the foreground colour that I use using the colour picker. And then I just need to increase the size, around again between about 8 and 10, so I'll go with 9. And then we need a drop shadow. Now at the moment it is set on black. I'm going to leave it on black, but you could maybe close this down, pick a new colour and then so you know what the numbers are. But I'm going to leave mine on black for this particular version, and I'm going to change the angle of this. So I have the arrow pointing upwards, but the actual shadow will be coming down below the image. And I'm just going to lower the opacity down to around the 45 mark, and I'm going to increase the distance to about around the 24. Yeah, 24 will do. I'm just going to blur it slightly, so maybe about 10, and the intensity I'm going to leave on 0. So I'll click OK on that. Just come off that tool a second, So I'll come to the move tool, so I can just position this a bit better. If you want to change the size in PhotoPlus, you've got to then come to the deform tool, but I need the deform tool to alter this middle image, so I'll just click and highlight the middle layer, and now this time I need to hold down the shift key. I've got to remember it's shift key in PhotoPlus and control key in Affinity Photo, and I'm just going to, I'll just zoom out a bit, and then it's just a case of position this until you get to the position that you like it. I think that will do. I'll just, so that is that process finished. So again, you can just save, export under a new name, and it probably does look slightly different to my first attempt. Yes, because each time I'm picking colours from probably different parts of the image, so the actual tones and what have you are slightly different, but you'll get the idea. So that is the end of both parts of this video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.